I mean, we're watching a revolution happen in front of our eyes in all caps, and it's thrilling and it's crucial and it's fantastic to watch. And we have to make sure that its roots are deep.
Do you like books?
I'm outlining a new writing project.
Who wrote this book?
Read it. What are you reading?
Sometimes I'd write something.
What are you writing?
Have you written anything lately?
I'm Amanda Stern, and this is Bookable. On today's show, race in friendship. Nell Freudenberger was on Bookable earlier this year to talk about her New York Times best-selling novel, Lost and Wanted. I was so excited when she agreed to this bonus episode and even more thrilled with the author she chose. Emily Bernard is the author of Black is the Body, Stories from My Grandmother's Time, My Mother's Time, and Mine, which I'm actually reading right now, and Some of My Best Friends, Writings on Interracial Friendships, which I just ordered from my local bookstore, my local independent bookstore. Emily and Nell are new friends, but that didn't stop them from covering some serious ground, and they don't shy away from the question of race in their interracial friendship. From their rituals around writing to how silence doesn't save you, this conversation exceeded all of our expectations, not just of their conversation, but of any conversation. So, my people, let's dig in.
So, do you want to start by talking about writing during this time, during the pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think I'm writing during this pandemic like I'm doing everything, just slowly and catch as can. It's never been more clear to me how important are rituals,
Yeah.
And it really is. At the same time, I'm having a difficult time every day, recommitting to those rituals that I know are crucial to my mental health and to my ability to write. But it's a daily commitment to get up and to decide to try to do the work. How about you?
Yeah. Can I ask you if you have any rituals around writing that are, particular to you?
Well, I always imagined myself as somebody who needed absolute silence and just a kind of predictable setting to work in. I don't really like working in coffee shops because anything,
right.
My experience, anything can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, from the most mundane to the most, but I've learned to work within some chaos and to create some order in the chaos of just living in a house. Like, I have my kids at home all the time and they are unpredictable. But still, working early morning has never felt more crucial. Just to be able to have it in my head when I before the house wakes up. And fortunately, because I have teenagers, I have a lot of time in the morning before they're stirring. But that's the foundation. And if I don't manage to make it happen in the morning, it's the rest of the day is really compromised. How about you?
Okay, that makes me feel better because I'm also a morning worker, and I had this kind of luck during the time that the kids were still in school, in that I thought to myself, okay, this is happening, and I'm not going to get anything done between March and May. Mm-hmm. And I was actually working on a novel, and I thought, I don't want to lose those months. And maybe what I'm going to do is wake up every morning at 4:45, because the one thing I think that's easier about teenagers than little kids, this may be the only thing, is that little kids wake up so goddamn early. And so I told my husband I was going to wake up at 4:45, and he was like, okay, whatever you want. Because, I have kids who are young enough who need you to sit next to them for remote schooling. And actually it worked so incredibly well because I felt like it's weird to say, but I felt like I sort of accessed this 20-something version of myself living in New York City and getting up early before work to write. And all of a sudden I felt like I had that energy again. The rest of the day was a nightmare, and by 5 or 6 o'clock, I was yelling at the kids and horrible. But I actually was getting so much done in those 2 hours before I had to, start the breakfast and the school and all that. And since the kids have gotten out of school, when I should have more time, theoretically, I'm slowing down, and I don't it's like I don't feel the same kind of magic when the light outside is full sun that I did when it was dark and I was the only one awake in the house.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And I think you're absolutely right. I remember when the kids were small and I would try to get up to have that time that I mean, I was amazed. You were a real model for me, getting up and doing that every day and carving out that time. But I remember Isabella would come and join me in the kitchen and I was going to sit here, Mommy. And then she would kind of lean over and then she's like on my keyboard. And I kept telling myself, you're going to miss this one day. But
I know. I'm always telling myself that. But I'm a model for nobody right now. I mean, I'm getting nothing done and the kids are in camp. I don't know what's wrong with me,
But I told you have to give yourself a minute to breathe, before I think the next thing, because you have done a lot of work.
So I think the other thing is what you happen to be writing, and it's sort of a crapshoot, because I remember when Trump was elected, as we all do, and feeling that this, not only can I not write, but I can never write again. There's no point to anything I'm doing. And I've had other times like that, around September 11th. But in this case, because I was working on something that was, it was about a disaster. It was set in the future. I think that's like 99% of fiction writers right now are working on that novel. But because it wasn't this disaster, I had all the disaster feelings, but I had sort of a different container to put them in. And it was just happenstance that was the thing that I was trying to do when this started.
I understand it. So it's the energy from this time, or even as, awful as it is, it's contributing to the work. You're able to harness it to do the work.
That's right. And I mean, I wanted to ask you about that because you've written just this beautiful essay in The New Yorker about the effects of the George Floyd killing inside the four walls of your house, and what it's like, moving from teaching college students to kind of being a mother and not being able to go out, and having these girls who are in between children and adults, and having to talk about these incredibly upsetting events.
Yeah. Well, I'm that New Yorker essay took a lot out of me, and I was actually just walking.
Well, we don't even have to talk about it if you don't want to. But if anyone who's listening to this wants to read an incredible essay, I just wanted to kind of direct them where to go.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I wrote it because I wanted it to be read. I was walking my dog earlier, and some neighbors stopped, and the way they were talking, I knew they'd read it, and then one of them did say, thank you for writing that essay. And I thought, one of those catch-22 moments, because I thought, well, this is exactly why I wrote this essay. Not so this particular neighbor would read it, but so that people would read it and be affected by it. But it really did cost a lot. And I think I'm having that funny response that maybe we often have as writers, just thinking, I'm so glad that I got across what I was trying to get across, but I'm kind of watching it, curious, because I know how vulnerable it made me to write it by watching the reactions of other people, and how actually vulnerable the essay makes them feel. Reminds me that it costs a lot. And I wouldn't, trade that for anything. And that's, you pull from the well, and it was necessary, writing it. I really felt and still feel it was about just trying to make sense of life. And the only way I know how to make sense out of life is to try to write about it and understand it that way, and just keep moving. The essay doesn't have, I think, any real conclusions, but that's not why I write. But it was tough, and it feels, as hard as it is, and as much as I want to hide in these multiple crises that are happening, for me, my instinctive animal response is just to despair. Writing is about fighting against that, and fighting against a really innervating pull into silence, that I think I've just been fighting my whole life. And it's about staying present. Right. It's like there's no safe place to be in this thing. Either you're going to be engaged and make yourself vulnerable, or you're going to be silent. And that doesn't really, that doesn't help anyone. And I've learned that, through hard experience, that silence doesn't save you. Trying to remain safe doesn't save you. It doesn't save me.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I as much as I felt a real need to write that essay, it was driven by a need. I also just longing to just step out of the kind of public conversation in a way. Just there's so much happening that I don't understand, and I just really want to watch and listen.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, there's another place where the privilege of being a white writer is to say, okay, I'm just going to use this time to educate myself and learn and listen. And if I write about race, somebody may say, wow, congratulations for taking that on. Or if I don't write about it, nobody is going to say anything, right? That is, people say it over and over again, but that privilege of not having to do it, and if we're going to sort of save ourselves by writing during this time, if we're going to fight off despair or, even just hold on to a sense of who we are outside of being mothers, right? Which is something that writing in the morning gives me. I feel like I'm myself. And so whatever I'm doing for the rest of the day, even if it's just cooking and cleaning continuously, I still feel like myself. And we all want to do that as writers, but the burden of, being expected to write about it, I imagine, is really hard.
Yeah. I mean, but it's a, this is, I think, defines the position of the Black writer since Black people have been writing anything. How are you going to show up for the struggle? There's always a struggle.
Right.
And I, take a lot of comfort knowing that generations of Black writers before me have been wrestling with this question. For some people, it's pretty clear. For others, it is not clear. And there's a lot of privilege I have just simply being able to, having a platform, as you say, and being able to make these kinds of choices. For some Black writers, there are even fewer choices. So to be able to, I'm mindful of that too. And I think, though, that my thinking about the way that I write about race and, what it has to say in this present time. And I've talked about this a little bit. I thought about my book, and
right.
I was over the course of a year and, however long it's been, doing interviews. I've been asked sometimes, would you write the book the same way now? And that's always a strange question. The answer is always yes or no.
Right.
I mean, the book, reflects your thinking.
But that's true of every book, right? I mean,
it's true of every
no
book
could
yeah.
be the same book,
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I was rereading some of the essays from Black is the Body, which is one of those books that you can, read with joy again and again. And I'm not saying this because we're on a podcast or because we're friends. I just, I love these essays so much. And I'm thinking about the moment where you are going to church with your grandmother in Mississippi. And am I right that it's Hazelhurst?
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she is suspicious about your desire to go to a Southern Black church because she thinks that you're doing a sort of anthropological study, which you, in a way you are, because you're going back to Yale to come, it's something that you think that you're going to use in your academic work in some way. And, but when you're in the church, you're having these feelings that, are like a revelation. And that, that's fascinating to me too, just all the different layers of ways of writing about it and the way that your grandmother thinks you should be going to church or not going to church. I love this moment where she says she's suspicious of you because kids your age shouldn't want to go to church.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, there's a lot in that moment. And I remember straddling all of these different interests and concerns. But, the lesson from that moment that I think about every day has to do with art and labor, and the fact that art is happening everywhere all the time. And there are people who are just dedicated, to doing the work that they need to do in this life. And I believe in that above all. I believe in it above any other kinds of politics. I believe in being dedicated to the craft of getting it down right.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about that, and what it means to hold this belief, in this moment, that there is something transformative about simply telling the truth and doing it in a way that's the most effective and the most careful, to taking care with the articulation of truth and reality is something I take very seriously. And I also care a lot about nuance, and something that I think about in this moment. Of course, I wonder what about nuance and what about subtlety, which are so dear to me, contradictions and ambivalence.
And that your essays are that's everywhere in your essays. I said this, of course I was lying, and then we move to the next paragraph. It's just you're never landing on an answer in a a definitive, almost never in a definitive way, and that's something that I love about your work.
Well, I love that about your work too, my friend, and that's how I think we became friends first. Our books were friends first,
That's right.
And then we caught up. But I love that too. And your book to me, it takes up. If I didn't know you, I remember, if I didn't know you and I read that book, the first thing I would think was that this white writer actually knows some Black people, which is something I don't always feel, when I'm reading, books, even by books that I love, it might become clear to me, okay, well, this person has a very limited worldview when it comes to race. But I might value something else about the book, but that's something, it's a very subtle thing and it's really meaningful in your book. Like just they're kind of, and it's not simply because you have Black characters, in the world that you've created, but simply the way that your characters are interacting with each other. That subtlety, the kind of almost mundane way that the friendship evolves, even though, one of the characters is, and that's not a spoiler to say, well, she begins the book, she's not alive, but there's a subtlety, and I don't know if that's something you can teach, but it's clear to me, I was actually saying that one of my daughter's friends came over who's white, and we're doing the study group, this summer on systemic racism, these 14-year-olds.
It's amazing. It's amazing that your daughter, when told that she should learn something by you, that she should spend some of this time learning something, chose to embark on a study of systemic racism. I mean, that's a credit to her mom.
Well, it's also
and dad, both of you. But
I'll take any credit right now. I'll take it. But I must say, it's so much just about them, and the things that interest them. And Isabella, it's really about survival. She said to me, it's one thing to study ignorance, but it's worse to be ignorant, and she wants to be, she's getting ready for the fight, going back into school, frankly, that's what she's preparing for. She wants to be informed, and I'm arming her, summer, in that old fashioned way with knowledge, but we're reading and studying a lot. And so their friend who comes in as part of this, with them, was talking about, actually wasn't even really talking about it. I asked her because I've noticed that her friendship group, she is very, it's Vermont, and she manages to have an absolutely, diverse friendship group, this white girl who's they're friends with. And I was telling her, I think that it's going to serve you in your life in ways you don't even realize. You think it's just being friends with who you want to be friends with, but the fact that you're the kind of person who, is going to be open always to the possibility of having relationships across, these whatever divides, because you've already been doing that. It really is about a practice. And that's something in your book too. It's just, these characters have grown up together. They know each other. It's not that, race is very much alive in their relationship. And, there's so many
as it is, I think that we've talked about this, but as it is it's hard to imagine relationships between people of different races where race is not a topic. But on the other hand, you kind of taught me something about that, because I was talking about a relationship of people I knew, of a white woman who said she never talked about that with her Black husband. And you sort of pointed out to me that there are all, there's all sorts of reasons that I might not understand about why that, about the hurdles. And I guess I think maybe because the Black women I'm friends with are writers for the most part, that of course we talk about it. It would be we're talking about our books, and it would be strange if that never came up.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
but I also think what you're talking about with your daughter's friend, the kind of work we both read. You were lucky enough to have the galley and read Isabel Wilkerson's new book, Caste. And I've only read the excerpts in the magazine section, but she talks about the relationship of caste to race in American society, and the way that caste is this lifetime of neurological inputs about what jobs and positions in society people who look a certain way are supposed to have, and that these inputs sort of make these grooves in our experience that are really hard to step outside, and that it's kind of a miracle that people are able to forge connections across them. And I think you're right to tell a white teenager in Vermont who has a diverse social group that she's doing something that's going to, be a blessing for her for the rest of her life.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I believe in that kind of work, the kind of that very subtle kind of work. I mean, we're watching, a revolution happen in front of our eyes in all caps, and it's thrilling, and it's crucial, and it's fantastic to watch. And we have to make sure that its roots are deep, and that has to happen. I believe in our everyday interactions, and that's something that, Isabel Wilkerson's book, which I mean, this book is fantastic. And
it's to read it. Even the article has so much.
Right. And that's the thing that she does. I mean, I read the book. Right. I was very fortunate to be able to read it in Galley, and have a review coming out. And I read it, and the first few pages I had to lie down because it was so wonderfully and terribly confusing, and that it was a dystopian tale that actually is about our actual lives in the wake of, the 45 presidency. And she manages to tell this and it's beautifully rendered. I mean, the prose is impeccable. So it's having this incredible aesthetic response to the, beauty of the prose and the tale and the skill and the work. But the story was dreadful, and it was true. And so I had to lie down.
Can you tell us what the story is about? How she begins the book for me? And
what she does is she, right. I mean, the first few pages, just stay with it. She'll knock you out with the genius of it. She talks about a plague. She talks about these reindeer whose bodies are now emerging as a result of global warming.
Right.
And I forget the reason why. Right. Exactly. But they're saturated with these toxins that are, now being exposed and causing this, tragic, these deaths, among the human population. So the story is about the damage we've done to the earth and to each other as a result of global warming, our irresponsibility as citizens as global citizens. And she connects it to Trump, and she literally brings us seamlessly, skillfully into an encounter in a parking lot between two white strangers in Brooklyn over, I think it was a grocery store parking lot, about Trump. And it's in real time. I mean, in the moment of COVID. So not only is she brilliant, she was able to do this, now.
That's amazing. Right. She just wrote that, I guess. That's incredible.
I was physically stunned, by all the things that are happening in those first few pages. And she continues. Her hand is steady throughout telling the story, which is a beautiful story she tells. And she does this thing. She also weaves in, some personal moments from her personal biography. And she then pulls back and gives you this bird's eye view, what's happening in the world, and making connections between the Jim Crow South you know, the Third Reich and kind of
and India as well.
You're right. It's generational perspective on India. It is masterful what she does, and the linking from the personal to the political, and from the very local to you know, this global view. I mean, she does it so beautifully.
Yeah, I think it's incredible.
It's so well informed. It's so, trenchant is a word I think maybe, but it is, and yet somehow there's, you know, she literally has a vision. You know, she has a vision for us, and how to work our way out of it. So the bad news is, you know, that the caste system, you know, that defines our culture is deeper than, of course, American racism, and that's what she is showing us. Right? There's actually no escape from this, you know. But what you do, what you read and learn in the book is that you can undo this. It takes time. I mean, you know, it's almost sort of mirrored in the care and nuance of her prose, right? It takes living in a nuanced way and thinking in a careful way that leads to right action. And so she has their figures that she looks at, and in the book that are instructive about how it's possible to work against this. But of course, it is a daily practice, just like the practice of art, of making art.
Right. And she has these incredible personal anecdotes, like the one where she's interviewing the boutique owner in Chicago, who just repeatedly, for an amount of time that seems incredible, refuses to believe that she is who she is because, you know, as she says, I came in a package that, you know, wasn't what he was expecting to see. Exactly. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I remember very well. Yes.
Yeah.
And what's also interesting is that
how she moves, like you're saying, from that to much bigger, more abstract questions.
And she that moment she refuses to give us what we want, which is, you know, the name of the store. You know, we want. Right. She refuses to give us that. Her point is that's not the point. You know,
it's not the point. It's like, because she doesn't want to give us someone to blame, right? I'm also I can't help imagining though that guy being like, thank God.
I know.
How did I dodge this bullet, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're reading this and you're imagining. I mean, you're already just in love with her when you're reading this book. Yeah. If you haven't fallen in love before with her previous work, but you want vengeance. You know, you want this guy out, and she says, no, that's not the point. You have to keep going. Actually, your work is harder. Yourself. Right, your work is
white person
much
reading
more
the
difficult.
New York Times magazine.
You will. It's too easy for you to imagine that getting rid of this person gets rid of the problem, and that is something we all. I mean, as human beings, you know, we want to excise the damage, but that's not how it works. I mean, we're all implicated in this problem. We all are, and that's what she is showing us. But there's this kind of incredible. I'd say there's just the word wisdom is really, for me, operative. When I was reading the book, I felt like I was reading something frankly prophetic. That's how strongly I feel about this book.
Time for a short break. When we come back, Nell and Emily talk about the privilege of being able to sit back to learn while white. Stick around. Bad on Paper is a women's lifestyle podcast hosted by best friends Grace Atwood and Becca Freeman. The podcast hosts a monthly book club that culminates in a book discussion episode the last Wednesday of every month. Books are selected across a range of genres, from YA to romance to thrillers and literary fiction. Recent book club picks have included One Day in December by Josie Silver, We Came Here to Forget by Andrea Dunlop, Three Women by Lisa Taddeo, and American Royals by Catherine McGee. In between book clubs, the hosts interview interesting people about everything from their careers to their beauty routines. Recent guests have included supermodel Cindy Crawford, children's book author Eva Chen, and late-night talk show host and author Graham Norton. Both hosts are huge readers and share what they're reading in every episode. Many of the reviews mention that it feels like sitting down for wine or coffee with your best friends. You'll love their Facebook community because they make great book recommendations. Listen to Bad on Paper every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. to this Bookable bonus conversation with Emily Bernard and Nell Freudenberger.
I'm fascinated by that reindeer metaphor that you were talking about, because over and over again, I think we're seeing that the way that we can think about environmental justice and the way that we're trying to think about racial justice are tied together. I'm thinking about the other metaphor that she uses about the house, she has this problem in the ceiling of her house, and there's water. There's clearly water damage. And it's a question of whether you're going to paint over it and seal it and hope for the best, or whether you're going to do the harder work of taking it all apart, seeing what's under there, and fixing it properly. So I guess when you talk about, obviously, I don't know what the solution that she's proposing is, but I think it must have to do with that daily work that, adding when you're going about your day, an awareness of this, and the way that I think about it a lot in teaching my white kids, and trying to figure, and I don't feel like I'm the best person to do it. And, thank God that they have Black teachers at school who are also involved in this. But, I guess I feel I'm really uncomfortable when you say, you did a good job with this in this friendship in a novel. And, I can tell that you have Black friends, because I feel like I'm really close. I feel like I'm hiding how close I am to, overtly racist family members, and my grandmother in particular, but also how complicated it is to talk about. You can hear it in my voice, to talk about it and write about it with my parents still alive, and with the love that I had for this particular grandmother still very much in my heart. And the piece of writing that has made me think, I think the most clearly about it, is your essay. I'm actually not sure is it White Friend, where you go out to drinks with your colleague and talk about the grandmother in the back of the throat?
Mm-hmm. No, that's that's teaching the N-word.
Teaching the N-word. The fear of the grandmother in the back of the throat, right? And I think when I think about it, I think when I first started thinking about it, it was sort of remembering things that my grandmother had said in the context of today, and thinking, oh my God, just realizing that there was actually a history of enslavement in my family, and wondering why I had never quite put that together, knowing that I have this Southern agricultural family on one side. So there was that. But then, I think actually what I think about much more these days is not that, but is the moment between my grandmother's generation and my parents' generation, where it was as if suddenly we had become progressive and liberal, and there was no question of racism. And obviously I'm talking about the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, and that was the message. It was like, your grandmother was racist and she was from the South, and we live in New York and then Los Angeles, and of course we aren't, and there was no work. And I guess I think what in the last 10 years, what I've understood, and I kind of can't believe that I didn't understand it earlier, and I blame myself, because I went to Harvard in the late 90s, when I could have taken all kinds of fantastic classes with the of people who were teaching there, and I didn't, I didn't think those classes were for me. I kind of can't believe that I didn't have the imagination to understand that I should have been reading African American literature in school.
I see that. I think, I hear you, and I know you, and I know what you're wrestling with. I think on this end of things, though, that, your grandmother didn't hurt me. White supremacy hurts me every day, and it has hurt, everybody that I love. But I presume, that white people I know are just a couple of degrees away from something like that. I mean, I wouldn't trust a white person who in this country who would try to boast of, any kind of lineage that was made them pure. I wouldn't trust that. I would think that why is that? And it's sort of what something I like that Ta-Nehisi Coates was talked about in his book, the politics of personal exoneration. I mean, it's not, I'm not without my own things, so I'm not interested in purity. And so the thing that bothers me, and, it's too early to be, I think, maybe critical of this movement, but that idea that there are some people who are pure and there's some people who are not. I'm just simply not interested in that. I don't believe in it. And I don't see how that helps anything. That just sort of becomes about vanity. I make mistakes on a daily basis. And, there are, and there are whatever, I mean, ancestral, these ancestral things. So I don't know who gains, in that game about who's pure.
That's right.
And
and even when you think you don't want to participate in it as a white person, even when you recognize it, and I see it, it's like I get into the school runs these workshops, and I always sign up for them, and we get in the little breakout room to talk, and you're supposed to, there was actually a white guy who was in, it's a workshop that's run by Black women who are happen to be in positions of power at this school. But it was what this guy said, about teaching with love that kind of stuck with me, because we got into the breakout room and there's this British guy, and he is, I actually think we're not supposed to talk about things that happen in the breakout room outside the breakout room. What happens on Zoom stays on Zoom. But, somebody says something that every fiber of you reacts against, and you want to jump on them, right? And that is the most counterproductive thing you can do. I mean, the person stops listening, of course. And it's, it's similar to what happens when you're trying to talk about sexism with somebody who doesn't get it. And so, that kind of teaching with love message, and especially as you try to teach children, try to teach white children, is, of course, I guess I worry sometimes that the education that they're getting, what if they rebel against it in some way? That scares me sometimes, because, well, I guess what I mean is that they, they're, as they get older, they challenge us, more and more. And I know that they are going to see the work that we are trying to do, that I'm trying to do for, to the way I'm trying to educate myself. I know it's going to seem old fashioned, and they're going to point out my mistakes. And that's what's supposed to happen, but I don't want them to shy away from this conversation because they feel like their dad and I are shoving it down their throat, because we're so worried about, we're so eager for them to learn it. I guess I reread your Teaching the N-Word essay, and that's about college students. And I was thinking, well, what about little kids, right? What about when my 8-year-old says, "What is the N-word?" And I have to try to explain to him what the difference is between that bad word and other bad words, right? And I worry. I tried, and I worry that maybe I didn't do it right.
Yeah, I have a friend who's, just a really, she's a white woman, a poet, and a beautiful poet, and a really, clear and fierce feminist, who raised a daughter who would taunt her by saying she was going to become a Victoria's Secret model, and that was like, horrible.
This is what I'm worried about, Emily.
Exactly.
Luckily, no one in my family is going to be able to become a Victoria's Secret model, so I'm safe on that, ground.
But, of course, it made me laugh, from this distance. But I saw, the daughter picked the perfect thing, and the mom didn't see it coming. And, of course, she got over it, and she's not a Victoria's Secret model. But,
of course not. Right.
I think, my daughters, one of my daughters will say, I want to become rich. And it's like, I really, that is not a good goal. So, that too, it's like, gosh, what would break my heart more, actually, and as Julia said around the table the other night, what if I was a Trump supporter? that would be really difficult, wouldn't it? Together would make dinner time conversations really unpleasant.
Oh
So
yeah,
I saw
no,
her
no.
playing with that.
When Trump was elected, I can't. So how? God, it seems like 100 years ago. I guess it was 3 years ago. So the littler one would have been 5, and he used to be like, "I'm voting for Trump. I like Trump." Just because. Of course, we were like, I would look at my husband and be like, "Ignore. Like, don't say anything."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is their job to annoy and antagonize us.
Exactly.
But I think that, look, I know your kid. I've never met your kids in real life, but I feel I know them a little bit, and there's no way, there's no way they're going to become, yes. And it's also not just what you say, but what you model, as we both know. My daughters would, they would, I think they love to claim that, they hate reading, all these things. But, when I'm not looking,
they're reading.
Yeah. And when I'm not looking, I love their values. I love the values that they're developing.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So that's what,
all of it is modeling, right? You cannot say, you cannot say we are not racist and never have a Black person enter your house, which is sort of
that's true.
The situation I think of a lot of people in my generation growing up, right? But I also feel like a hypocrite if I say to my daughter, which I have said, my friends Emily and Allison have enriched my life in a way that I can't even describe, and sometimes it takes work if you're living in the environment you're living in Park Slope to make this happen for yourself. But I encourage you on your soccer team to try to befriend everyone. And it's not everyone's not going to be the right person to be your friend, but somebody will. But I do feel like a bit of a hypocrite because of where we're raising her. It's her social world is pretty white.
Yeah, of course. I'm dealing with the same thing here in Vermont. And I watch. Look, my daughters right now I'm learning a lot. As they learn, I learn. And as they become young people in the world with very clear ideas about who they are, I realize things about myself that are uncomfortable. And so, we're just all trying to make it. And there's nothing about like being a parent to keep you humble, But that's also true, I think, about being someone who's just being open to learning and understanding that it truly is a lifelong process, and it's frustrating, and and being in the classroom, I've learned from my students, I remember when Me Too was dropping and I was teaching a class on African-American women writers, and my students were teaching me so much, and that sounds incredibly corny, but I really was, I remember the moment thinking, because they were, the literature we're reading was perfectly dovetailing, if you teach a class on women writers,
right.
Me Too, and I remember the moment when I thought, I went from applauding them as they kind of would report on changes they were making in their lives and the ways they were standing up and defying expectations of their deepest, closest loved ones. And I remember thinking, oh, I have to do that now too. I've actually put up with a lot of this stuff too, like the Whisper Network. I participated in this, and and that was stunning, realizing that, guess who's not pure? Guess who's been complicit in these systems that I hate? And so that process, it's continuous, and it's startling, and I'm thrilled to be alive in this moment, to witness and watch all of it. But it's just, we're just gonna have to keep trying to remain vigilant and stay aware, but also to, I think, I don't know about you, but I need those breaks sometime. Sometimes I just need to, prioritize mental health and just take a break, and stay away from the news. And I need to just sort of get into the core, back into the core, into the core beliefs that, are bigger than any of this, about what I think it means to be a human being.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the way that we do that, at least for you and me, is getting back into the, into those routines of writing that are sometimes easier and sometimes harder to maintain. I was thinking about, I have a student that I was supposed to talk to this afternoon, and she sent me, her essay in the middle of the night and said, I've been having writer's block since the pandemic started, and this is all I did, and I'm sorry, but I'm just sending you what I have. And I thought, my heart sort of went out to this 15-year-old, and I want to tell her sort of in a gentle way the way that a teacher once told me, that I don't believe in writer's block, but also that so many grown-up writers are not writing right now, and she needs to cut herself a break. And gosh, I think it's really hard for teenagers. I think this must be the hardest age to be kind of shut in a house all of a sudden with your family.
Yeah.
The little kids kind of retreat into their younger selves.
Exactly.
And they're okay,
yeah. It's these strange times, and I hope to be alive at the other end of it, to have a chance to kind of sort it out and figure out what this moment meant. But we will be doing.
Well, I do too, Emily. I hope that we'll be talking to each other about this at the end, and we'll both still be alive. I think that's something to work for sure.
And maybe on that note.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
This is great. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And thank you, Amanda, for putting us together.
Always thank you, Amanda, for Bookable.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Nell, for this incredible conversation. Nell Freudenberger's most recent book is Lost and Wanted. It's published by Vintage Contemporaries, and the paperback is out now. Emily Bernard is the author of Black is the Body, Stories from My Grandmother's Time, My Mother's Time, and Mine, which is also published by Vintage, and the paperback is also available now. Bookable is a production of Loud Tree Media. I'm your host, Amanda Stern, 5 feet tall and growing in every friendship. We're produced by me, Beau Friedlander, and Andrew Dunn, who also mixes and sound designs the show. Beau is Loudtree's editor-in-chief. Find us on the web at bookablepod.com and subscribe and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this show. That's one of the best ways for other listeners to find Bookable. We're back next week with an extra special episode, and we will see you then. This is Bookable.